But without stopping with literature, without stopping with social media, can we extend AI to the whole spectrum of pharmacovigilance? So that is what gives us, leads us to the second force, that is the cutting edge. So I take pleasure in inviting Dr. Krishna Aswalayan, Head of Pharmacovigilance and Ansela Consultancy Services, to speak on artificial intelligence in pharmacovigilance. What does it mean? So Krishna brings his 14 years of pharmacovigilance experience in the pharmaceutical sector, including 5 years of clinical experience to help in technological advances that helps in solving issues related to patient safety. Passionate to bring technological solutions into the real world to address the challenges in field of life science, healthcare and biotechnology. Over to you, Krishna.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. So, yes, so I would like to introduce what is artificial intelligence. You know, we always hear this term artificial intelligence and we keep getting ambiguous answers. We don't know what exactly does it mean. Forget what exactly it means, we don't know where to use it in PV. So here what I'm going to do is, I'm going to attempt to tell you where we can use this in PV. Now, before I go into where we going to talk about this, I'd like to talk to you a typical week of a PV scientist or a PV physician. So they come on Monday morning, they see a huge, they open their safety database, and they see that they have to do medical review of 200 cases. 2 days, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday cases are also inside there. So he finishes that by the Monday afternoon. He then has to jump into the PSURs, DSURs. There are 4 PSURs, there are 3 DSURs, and then that will take his next 2 days. Then while he's finishing and completing the next PSUR, the Thursday and Friday, you get an email that FDA needs urgent HA response. So you finish the urgent HA response, and by Friday you say, okay, let me go home and relax now. You'll get a call from the regulatory department. We have forgot to give this ad hoc report to China. We need to give it by Tuesday. Weekend gone. So there is always a gap here. You know, always there's a gap here, and that said, you are so involved in the process. You're so involved to meet timelines, compliance, quality. You start failing to think out of the box. You know, I like to use that cliche. We are so process driven in PV that we fail to see where we can innovate. So that's why I stopped getting the functional things anymore. I've dedicated my time now to think about how we can plug the gaps using automation, using artificial intelligence, and here I am trying to tell you what I have understood from artificial intelligence. Mind you, a disclaimer, I'm a physician by training. I do not know technology. I know a little bit statistics. So the agenda is I'll take the introduction. I'll talk to you about what is safety data, breaking down the data training process, then advanced analytics framework, then scaling in the production environment, and of course I would like to talk to you about some real world life utilizations of these AI techniques. So now after, so the challenges, I just told you what a resource faces in PV, but what it is at a holistic level, so as we know that incoming data is increasing by 20 to 30% yearly. Now the data is going on increasing, but the resource count remains the same. That also does not increase by 20 to 30%. So your workload also goes on increasing, and finally one day you will collapse from stress. I mean, this has happened. Actually, if you go to any global pharma company, they give the sick leaves. If you compare the sick leaves or the stress leaves that they take in Europe, especially in Europe, they allow that. They're very labor friendly. The PV department has got the highest sick leaves. So then, I would like to generalize it into 2 problems. One is handling the volumes. Okay, now what do you mean by handling the volumes? You have your increased ICSRs, increased aggregate reports, increase signals for validation. Then you have increased number of license partners. What do you mean license partners? Now you want the company's got its ambition to grow globally. They will license their products to other partners. They will have to have pharmacovigilance agreements. So multiple license partners, multiple products, multiple regions. Suddenly you find yourself you have to manage the data of 400 to 500 license partners with 1,000 products in multiple regions. It's a nightmare. Then what happens here? Next part is what I like is after handling the volumes, you handle the knowledge. The knowledge from this data. What do you do for it? So again, now please note here, this is the knowledge we're talking about. The bread and butter of any knowledge in PV is aggregate analysis. That is where the knowledge comes from. You take any document, you take any process, it all leads to your aggregate analysis. So these two, both we have constraints in the PV department inherently. I call the PV department the stepchild of a pharma company. Because we always, we're not taken care of, it's only budget. No revenue, so not really important. So we have this limited budget, we have limited resource allocations. Any PV manager or a PV head has a nightmare of constraint management. So they are very good entrepreneurs who work in a constrained environment. So what is the solution for all this? The solution for all this is simple. You introduce automation, AI, machine learning. And also I would like to, bring the delight what I am facing by using AI and machine learning. But this statement captures it exactly. Years spent in artificial is enough to make one believe in miracles. I'll talk to you about certain things which I found quite exciting. So next here, what is it we're doing in artificial intelligence? So basically we deal with data and data science. Now when you talk about data science, other industries, I was just telling Supriya, in fact she was mentioning it, retail, finance, telecom, they're way ahead in data sciences and artificial intelligence. The pharma industry, especially the PV department, is struggling. The PV department does not, some companies only now they have started assigning statisticians, as safety statisticians to them. Earlier it was not there. Nowadays I have personally seen PV departments hiring behavioral scientists. This is the trend is going on. So PV is becoming a very, becoming such a big field where multidisciplinary approach has to be brought about to bring about effective patient safety. So then we have two kinds of data in PV. Simple, structured and unstructured. So what do we do with this structured? What is the structured data in PV? What is it? So what do we do with the structured data? We have to find the source, we have to analyze it, and then we have to do training. So not only you have to train the resources, you have to train your data also. That is what PV, that is what AI and machine learning is all about. So here it is, your structured data sources, ICSRs. It is well structured, it is so easy, it's a data scientist delight. My data scientists love to work with me with structured data. Because everything is put in place there, and everything, all I have to tell my data scientist what I want out of this. He's like, sir, mere ko aap kuch mat boliye, you tell me what you want. Don't tell me how to do the modeling and statistics, don't tell me that, tell me what you want. Then what do we do? What are the training options? So this is going to get a little technical, but it's good to know that there are two kinds of, for the structured data, there are two types of classification and non-classification algorithms. So classification we use for discrete data, and non-classification for dependent data. So discrete and dependent, let's not get into too much into statistics, but we have got two different algorithms for two kind of different data sets. They convert these data sets into binary systems, zeros and ones, and then they apply their statistical model. And where they get the statistical model from? They get it from certain things called libraries. There are libraries which from very popular software, free softwares called R and Python. And I must tell you that the FDA has recently started accepting outputs, clinical outputs from R. Initially they were only using SAS. SAS had a monopoly. Now R also we can submit our data based on R. So these libraries, so we have something like this, Python TensorFlow or Pandas or NumPy, scikit-learn. So these are just machine learning techniques. We just have to pick it up from the library and start applying them there. Now, if if there is nothing here from the library which suits your needs, the data scientist will have to devise their own algorithms to generate the outputs. Then, as the complexity of the data increases, we start using complex decision trees. So decision tree is nothing but a combination of all the algorithms, certain algorithms, to get your outputs. So this we can use, as I said, for ICSRs from external or internal sources in these formats, XLS or CSV files. And then where is the application here in PV? Where do we see it? So this we see it, in signal detection, in prediction and trend analysis in signal detection. So right now we have your regular MGPS, chi-square, ROR. They have become the traditional methods. The newer methods is one we are doing prediction analytics and trend analysis. So what does it mean? See, the human eye cannot actually find out the trends, especially trends where outliers are there. Like if you say for a particular age group or for a particular region, a naked human eye cannot look at it. So even if you scroll down looking in the Excel sheet, you cannot look at it. But here, using these algorithms, they can come up with these prediction statements. Now these prediction statements have to have a certain level of accuracy. This accuracy, this one interesting what had happened was, so we were struggling with the one data set of a large company, and we were trying to generate predictive statements. Whatever predictive statement is generating, for instance, let me take for the drug fentanyl, we are seeing abdominal discomfort in the child age group from the United States. So this is a kind of a predictive statement. The accuracy of this predictive statements was around 30 to 40% when you manually start looking at it. So what we our data scientist team and myself, we were trying to understand why we are not getting. We tried all different algorithms, tried to fix it, but still we are not getting the desired accuracy. Then we realized that we are not putting it in context. So we were trying to be specific and sensitive. So your predictive statements cannot be both. Either you want your predictive statement to be very sensitive, or you want it to be very specific. This depends on the exposure. That means how much has the drug been exposed in the population. So the more the drug has been exposed, the more specific you want to be. The less the drug has been exposed, that is the one that has just come to the market, the more sensitive you have to be. So here you have to put it into context. Then of course, aggregate analysis, we know, so while doing the prediction and trend analysis, suddenly one data scientist, he showed the output to me, and I looked at it. It just looked like an aggregate analysis. Out of the 300 cases retrieved, 550 were spontaneous, 6 were from literature, and these had the alternate explanation of the convex. It was looking just like that. I asked him, can you show me the case series? Let me see the case series. I looked at the case series. It resembled the output from a PSU or line listing. Exactly. So we discovered this by accident. A miracle I was talking about. We discovered by accident that you can do auto grouping and do the automatic aggregate analysis here. So we are working on that to increase the efficacy and the accuracy. Right now we have reached 60 to 70%. Now what do you mean by increasing the accuracy? So I'll get you there. Then in PV Ops we have another thing of predicting the case intake for a month, for a week, for a listing based on your historical data. That also can be done. Then unstructured safety data sources. Anybody would like to hazard a guess? What are the unstructured data sources in PV?
Social media is
Social media, fantastic. Anything else? Spontaneous reports they are structured into ICSRs. Any guess? Our previous session was about literature. Literature is total unstructured data. There is nothing structured about there in literature. So, however, having said that, when we recognize literature for monitoring for ICSRs, we have brought that into a structure. Having said that, there are some gems with only a drug event combination. There is no patient, there is no reporter, because there is a drug event combination. So that is one thing which we can start using text mining. Similarly, emails. Emails are another source of text unstructured data. voice transcriptions. Now you give dictaphone and automatically there are softwares, they transcribe it, and it has comes as nowadays it comes as a case input files. These voice transcription also is very unstructured data. So what do we do with unstructured data? So previously we used classification, non-classification, we used algorithms. Now here, what do we use? So something, this is beyond human comprehension. We use something known as deep learning, machine learning, medium supervised machine learning. So as you can see here, as the data keeps increasing and the performance, depending on what method you use, keeps increasing. So deep learning has got the highest performing methodologies here compared to your other machine learning techniques. Now mind you, when deep learning, so when you get the output from deep learning, you will not know how that output has come. You will not know it. You cannot document it. So if you cannot document it, FDA will not accept it. So FDA will not accept outputs from deep learning. So anything from structured data has to go through a supervised machine learning, which we do here. So we use neural networks for text images, for the medical images also we can use deep learning techniques here, rather machine learning. So again, application of this science, same thing. We can use it everywhere, the same thing. Next slide. So what do we do with the data training process? What does it entail? Okay, it's quite simple. It's very simple. So the first thing that you do is you get the data. How do you get the data? You get the data from the web, either through downloads or through APIs. It's not active pharmaceutical ingredient. It is application performance interface. And then you can do web scraping. Web scraping by a very aptly called algorithm from the Python soup called Beautiful Soup. It's a beautiful soup of all the information there. Now it's up to us to taste it. Now once you taste the beautiful outputs from the beautiful soup here, you start cleaning and preparing the data. This takes around 60 to 70% of the time, cleaning and preparing the data. Once you start cleaning and preparing the data, putting in missing values, you do your outlier treatment. You start doing feature engineering and selection. So this is done by not a data scientist. It is done by someone called a data engineer. So there are two aspects here: a data scientist and a data engineer. Then you start training your model. How do you train your model? Say you have some 100 ICSRs. You split the ICSRs into 80 and then 20. You train the model. In fact, you start applying your algorithms on those 20 ICSRs only, 20% of the data set. You keep doing it repetitively, it's an iterative process. You use around 1500 or 2000 times to get your desired results. Then you test it on the other 80% and see whether the outcomes are close to your desired outcome, or close to your desired percentage of 60, 70 or 80%. That has to be defined. Now this outcomes also, the accuracy has to be defined. You have to sit and define with the client. So this has to be got in writing prior itself. Then of course then you have to test the data. As I said, you test the data in the other 80% and to see whether the same outputs are being going on. This is completely an iterative process. Then you start improving. Again you go back to your part 2, clean, prepare, and continuously iterate this process. This is how it is done. This is what is data science. This is what is artificial intelligence. It's very simple. And we should not confuse, we should not be scared of artificial intelligence. A person like you and me, as Supriya said, we need to go back to our drawing boards, just learn R and Python, we will become data scientists. Because we already have the domain knowledge. So when we were building capabilities for artificial intelligence data scientists, we used to break our heads teaching engineers about pharmacovigilance and concomitant medications and comorbidities. So we already have the domain expertise. It is not that difficult to retrain ourselves in R and Python, or even some amount of statistics just to understand the models. There are already libraries there. So it's a beautiful thing. As I said, it's a brilliant thing. If we can get into it, this is the future for pharmacovigilance in India. Then this will be interesting for people who like to see how we scale it in production. So there are two ways. So one, you have the infrastructure consideration. So the infrastructure consideration is nothing but the top 5 slides are talking about the hardware in a 64 core bit. So 64 core bit is used for telecom companies and finance companies. So let's not go there. Where we can be, our PV data will be sufficient for 1 or 2 core bit. Then right now the way to go is go to the cloud. What we're talking down here below, go to the cloud. And then what about the algorithms? Does it need scaling up? No, it does not need scaling up. This is the software aspect of it. So it will work, if it works on this limited data, it will work with more data. So the beauty about machine learning is the more data you have, the more accurate you get. So you don't have to worry about scaling in the production environment. Now who does this kind of thing? So what is the staffing plan? Where do we get and implement this? So there are two things to it. So you have it all depends on the size and complexity of the data. And then you have, if it's complex and size is huge, you use a multi-thread approach. What is a multi-thread approach? You have, as I said, the process of breaking down the analytic framework. This is done by both data engineers and data scientists. So all these aspects are done by them. And then accordingly you choose your staffing requirements for that particular client. If the client requirements are not that high, you can do a single thread process where anyone, one data scientist or even a 0.5 data scientist can address their needs over here. So this is how we look at the the staffing plan for AI and artificial intelligence. It's not rocket science, believe me. It is just that somebody has to get down to brass tacks. As we heard today morning about how leadership, what leadership does to bring out new capabilities. Similarly, if you have the strong leadership, anything is possible. Then I would like to just quickly show you where data we are used machine learning. So in case processing, this is a typical case processing flow. You can see that right from as Supriya was talking about, we do it in bits and pieces. So here we can do it. You can club those bits and pieces into one application and bring it right up to stopping here at a manual QC level. So always we need to have a human intervention to confirm the results. And then once you do your manual QC, you can have your assisted causality assessment for your medical reviewers. So what do you need for medical review? It's nothing more. You need you're trying to look for an alternate explanation for the event, whether it is aggregate analysis or a single case. You're looking for an alternate explanation. What do? You look for conmeds, you look for comorbidities, you look for the history, you look for whether the time to onset, such criteria. There are 4 or 5 criteria. You can put that up here for the